more I read the Gospels, the more I'm amazed at how they were put together. Do you ever wonder about that? These days we're reading from Mark's Gospel. How did he put it together? I mean, the order of what he wrote and so on. Did he know what he was doing, or is this divine inspiration? And as I say so often, I say it again, we Catholics do not read the Bible primarily as just a surface amount. We read it as a story about, not as science or history, but as wisdom. And so today's gospel, as I already said, look for the deeper meanings. Whenever you read the scriptures, not every passage has one, of course, but always ask yourself, is there something deeper here that, for instance, Mark is telling us? And I think there is. In my notes that I put in the scriptures here, my posted notes, I have 4 words: crowd, cloak, to see, and the way. I think that's what the gospel is about. Not just then, but now. Think about the influence, number 1, of the crowds and how fickle public opinion is. Today's gospel. When the beggar first tried to cry out, they tried to shush him. And as soon as Jesus heard him, the crowd said, "Oh, come on over, he wants you." Within moments, the public opinion completely went from one side to another. So beware of that, especially on social media. Today, if something that's not true is repeated often enough, we assume it's true. The fickleness of the crowd. I always remember the first Iraq war. The day before we went into Iraq, 73% of the opinion of the Americans was, "Don't do it." The day after, exactly the same percentage, 73% were in favor of it. Think about our news. What's news today, in 3 days, we don't even remember it. So the culture, the crowd, and the public opinion, always think twice or maybe 3 times if you're inclined to follow it, because it can change within days. And that's the story in the gospel. That's number 1, the crowd. The second point is the man's cloak. It was everything he had. Look at all the blankets here that our youth have made for the homeless. This is all they have. The cloak for the beggar was his pillow, his sleeping bag, his covering. It was what he threw in front of him where people would toss coins. It was everything. And they tell me that the street people, they have to carry all their possessions with them all the time. They have no place to store them. That's why they have so little. Same with the beggar. When he heard Jesus, he threw aside his cloak. Don't miss that second point. He threw aside everything he had, everything he depended on. Are we willing to do that? I'm not. How about you? To throw aside everything. That's what it takes to be a true, total follower of Jesus. And I think we all have a long way to go on that yet. And in the gospel, then the next one is his sight. Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" How would you answer that? Now, if you had your Bibles with us, you'd be able to open up to Mark chapter 10, because immediately before this passage was last Sunday's gospel about James and John coming to Jesus. And Jesus said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said, "We want to be first and second in your new kingdom. We want to be important and powerful." This man says, "I want to see." What a difference. Now remember that I think the Gospels are about more than physical sight. I often tease myself, and I'm not debating the scriptures, but I often tease myself, what happens if this man really did not gain his physical sight, but he started to understand? Don't you ever wonder about things? And then when somebody explains it to you, what do you say? Oh, now I see. You're not talking about physical sight. You're talking about understanding. You're talking about insight. And maybe this man, giving his sight, was able to see the bigger picture. Isn't that what we all struggle with? We get so upset about the little things that we don't see the bigger picture of life. I heard some people talking this week, and one person said that at home, when they clean up the kitchen, they do all the dishes, they put the dishes away, they clean all the counter, somebody will come and put a dirty dish back on the counter. And the person says, that drives me nuts. But I sat there and thought, is that really important? Now, I do the same thing. Maybe you do too. Don't we get frustrated about the little things that really, in the bigger picture, don't make any difference? Aren't most of our arguments and disagreements about the little things? Oh, that we might see the bigger picture. Then the fourth item is, this man then followed Jesus up the road or on the way. And again, I propose to you, we're not talking about a physical journey. If you had your Bibles, you'd open it up now, and immediately after this passage, what happens? Jesus enters Jerusalem, where with less than a week, he's going to be crucified. That's the way. And this blind man, touched by Jesus, was able to follow Jesus in his way. The early Christians were called the followers of the new way. They acted differently than the rest of the culture. And that's what this blind man was willing to do. With the insight he had, he was able to give his life in the ways of Christ. And that's the challenge. Now again, in Mark's gospel, we just went through passages where Jesus gave us his teachings. Remember a couple weeks ago about marriage and divorce. A couple weeks ago about riches. Last week, we don't seek to be first and second. We seek to be servants. That's the way of Jesus. That's what we're invited into today. And it's not a once and done event. It's something we have to work at every day. So, are you willing to lay aside your cloak? Tell Jesus, I want to see. And then with the word and the sacrament, when we go back out to our normal lives, to follow the way of Christ. Not the way of the world, not the way of the crowd, but the way of Jesus. That's what disciples do.